sewing room today, and I'll be making this disappearing rail fence quilt block. And this isn't much to look at on its own, but when you piece about 4 of them together, you start getting really cool patterns. And this quilt block was requested by my subscriber, Callahan's Kitchen. Thank you so much for requesting it. So let's go over to the design wall, take a closer look at the block, and get started. Here I've arranged 2 of the blocks together. These are squared up to be 8 inches, and you can see the pattern starting to emerge. And here I've pieced together 4 of the blocks, and I've made them a little larger. These are 12 inches square. And you can really see the pattern emerging here with 4 of them. And you can see that each of the blocks, when you make it, contains a half square triangle, which is really cool because all you're doing is piecing together strips. So let's go over to the cutting table and I'll show you how to assemble the block. Begin by choosing 4 fabrics that coordinate but have some contrast between dark and light. Then cut your fabric into strips, and the strips will be 2.5 inches wide by a minimum of 8.5 inches long. You'll notice that my strips are longer than 8.5 inches, and that's because I cut these from some fat quarters that I had on hand. So what I'll do first is show you how to piece together the strips, and then I'll subcut after they're pieced together into 8.5 inch blocks. The technique I show you today will make 2 of these 8-inch square blocks that are mirror images of each other. And to get these 2, you'll need to make 2 of these strip sets that measure 8.5 inches square. So let me show you how to do that right now. Have your strips in the order in which you want them to appear in the block, then simply right sides together and pin. And I'm just pinning to show where I want to begin sewing and the direction that I want to sew. And then repeat that with these 2. Pin. I'll take it to the machine. I'll sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance all along here and here. I have my leader fabric. I have my 1/4 inch presser foot. And you might be able to see that the selvage edge is right here. And that's okay because I'm gonna trim it after I sew these strips together. And I just kind of hold it down evenly, line it up, and sew. And I'll repeat that off camera with my other set. Now that I have these sewn together, I will sew each side together. And again, right sides together. Off camera, I'll sew a 1/4 inch all the way down. I have my strip set sewn together. And before I cut it into my 8.5 inch segments, I'll press the seams. And I'm actually going to press from the back, and I'm going to press the seams open. And I don't usually do this on my quilt blocks, but I'm doing it here because there's no set way to arrange these blocks together. You want to be able to mix and match, and so the seam allowances are going to be going not always in the right direction for piecing. Some of them will be going in the same direction, so you'll get a very thick seam. And just to avoid that, I like to press this particular block with the seams open. First, I'll even out one of my edges. And I'm just lining up my ruler lines with the lines on my strip pieces. Now I'll flip it around. And this now measures 8.5 inches wide. So I'll cut a piece that's 8.5 inches long, so it'll be 8.5 inches square. And sometimes these edges get a little wonky, so I like to use this square up ruler. This is my Quilt in a Day square up ruler, but you can use any ruler that you like to use. I've got it all lined up at my 8.5 inch mark. And I'll repeat that one more time. And I'm cutting it a little bit beyond my 8.5 inch mark because my strip piece isn't exactly straight. So now I'll just flip it around and square it up. Now I have two perfectly square 8.5 inch segments. Now on the back of one, I'll draw a diagonal line from one corner to the other. And I'm using a fine point pen. This is a cutting line that I'm drawing, so you don't have to worry too much about it bleeding through your fabric or anything. Okay, I'll set aside my ruler and I will place my other strip set face up, and this one that I just drew the line on I will place on top, and I have my opposite color, so my black is over on this end here and the black is on this end here, and that's very important. And I'll line those up. And now I'll match up these seams very carefully. I'll continue off camera pinning each of my seams so the blocks are completely lined up. I have all my seams matched up, and I'll actually add another pin on each side. I'll take it to the sewing machine and I'll sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side of my drawn line. And I like to use my stiletto here just to kind of hold down my seams. And that one wanted to flip up anyway. I'll remove my pins. And now I'll cut right along my drawn line. And then open, and you can see the result. And I meant to show you before you actually cut, you can peek and make sure that your seams lined up, and these luckily look really good. And here's the other one, and I actually missed a pin. Check this one. And they look really nice. Now I'll take it over the pressing area and give it a press. Again, I'll press my seams open, just like I did before. Now I'll take these over to the cutting area, square them up to 8 inches square. And I have my diagonal line on my ruler, which I will line up with my diagonal line on my block. And what you do on these first two cuts is you want to make sure there's a little extra fabric beyond your 8-inch mark all the way around, and you want your line lined up exactly on your diagonal line on your ruler. And then flip the block around. This time line up exactly at the 8-inch mark. And make your final 2 cuts. And you have a perfectly square 8-inch block. I'll repeat that process off camera with my other block. And here they are joined up with the other 2. And you have a beautiful pattern already. You can switch it up however you want. You can turn a couple of them, all of them. I'll turn all of them to the right once. And you can see a whole other pattern emerge. And just play around with the blocks and you'll come up with a beautiful pattern for your next quilt. There you have it, the disappearing rail fence quilt block. And in my description, I'll also give you the measurements for this larger version. And I just love this block. It's really nice to make different designs, and it's a great way with this smaller version to use up your 2.5-inch strips. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.